afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Um, my name is Pam Scott. I'm the Director of Client Services with Oasis Solutions, and I will be your hostess for today in conducting this year-end webinar related to payroll. And we're going to talk about creating historical companies and how to copy the data over. We're also going to talk about the forms that you need and the processes related to year-end and payroll within Sage. So a couple of notes first is that your phone lines will be muted during this presentation. So if you do have questions, though, please feel free to submit them throughout the webinar. And there's a question area through your GoToMeeting link, and you can just type those in. And I will also stop and ask if there's any questions. I will get to as many questions as I can during our allotted time today. If we do run out of time, those questions will still get answered, and I will follow up with each individual person to provide answers to those questions. So please don't be bashful and ask, any questions that you have related to this process. The other thing that I want to say as I start out is that I'm going to use the term today, Sage 100. But when I use Sage 100, understand that that also means the same as Sage 100 Cloud or Sage 100C. So regardless of the maintenance plan you're on, basically determines the name of the product. What we're looking at today, the process that we're going through is exactly the same. So if I say Sage 100 for you folks that are running Sage 100 Cloud, it's exactly the same thing. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So what we're going to talk about first is a little bit about what's required to process W-2s from your Sage software. So the first thing is that you should be on a supported version of Sage. And the current supported versions are 2017, 2018, and 2019. So if you find that you are on a version prior to 2017, get in touch with us and we'll let you know if we anticipate any issues with you being able to print your W-2 forms. Also, as those of you that have been running Sage Payroll for a while, you know that at the end of the year, there could be an IRD, which is an interim release download. And that would include things like if there's new information that needs to be tracked for W-2 purposes or anything related to payroll, Sage will issue this download so that it can be installed on your system. Typically, these downloads are usually not made available by Sage until around the 19th or the 20th of the month. If there is a download released, if it is not applicable to your business, it's not mandatory that you install it. So, if it is something that folks are going to need, then we'll be discussing that with you as we schedule and do your year-end appointments. So we don't know yet exactly what's going to be included in that, and we actually will not know until Sage releases it and we get a chance to take a look at those release notes. If you do get a notification that there is an interim download, we ask that you do not arbitrarily install that yourself. So don't just send it to IT and say, hey, we need to install this. Because if you have third-party add-ons that integrate with your payroll module, if you have customizations related to your payroll module, installing that interim download could possibly overwrite custom modifications or somehow overwrite or disable a third-party product that you may have. So before anything is installed, we would want to take a look at what you have on your system. And for instance, if you have an Oasis modification, I would get with our development team and ask them if there's anything in the download that would overwrite any of our modifications, and then we would proceed based on what they tell us. We would also reach out to any third-party vendors or anyone that you work with just to make sure that we don't run into any issues. So in order to print your W-2s or to do e-filing, so it's printing, reporting, or e-filing, Atrix must be installed on the user's workstation. And that workstation must have sufficient permissions to allow the download of Atrix. That is not going to overwrite anything in your payroll system, but it's going to download any updated forms, all of the any 2020 information. So that workstation does have to have sufficient permissions in order for Atrix to update itself. You do have to be on a current maintenance, either if you're on Sage 100, I believe it's still called a business care plan. And if you are on Sage 100 Cloud, it is now referred to as a subscription plan. And that is basically your annual maintenance that you either pay on an annual basis. A lot of you have opted to go on a month-to-month basis. But if you are not current with a plan, the integration with Atrix will not work, and there's no way to get around that. It actually, when you try to access Atrix, it goes out and checks your licensure and confirms that you are current with your maintenance. Also, the workstation that is going to be printing the W-2s and accessing Atrix must have an active internet connection because Atrix is cloud-based. So you do want to make sure that you do have an active internet connection on that workstation. And I want to, this is a reminder from 2018, but in case maybe for any of you it's your first year using Sage Payroll or the first year you've been involved with payroll yourself, is that what we're going to talk about is Kentucky. So for the state of Kentucky last year, they changed the e-filing commitment, the threshold. So it used to, for Kentucky, if you had more than 100 W-2 forms that you were issuing for any given year, and I think that's per EIN, you were required to e-file. That was mandatory. I believe federal, the threshold is still 250, but in January of 2018, Kentucky lowered the threshold for state withholding forms to 26. So it changed it from 100 to 26. So if you are within the state of Kentucky and you have more than 26 W-2s, you are going to be required to e-file. If anyone on this call is from another state, we have a lot of clients in Tennessee and surrounding states, except I don't believe Tennessee has a state tax. But if you are concerned about whether or not on a federal basis or a local basis you're required to e-file, just check your local .gov sites and it will give you what that threshold is. The deadline for withholding information to the Department of Revenue is always January 31st. And also in Kentucky, the K-5 form, there's some information about that, that you must file that K-5 or submit the information in the new electronic, the accepted format that was put into place last year. So, and then there's a little note down here at the bottom that for Kentucky Form K-5 may be used if you report 25 or less W-2 statements. So before I get into the information on this slide, a little bit more information that will also be covered closer to the end of the webinar is a lot of time individuals want to know if there is a cost to use Atrix. and there is no additional cost to print your W-2 forms. So, transferring your data from Sage and bringing it into Atrix and doing your W-2 forms, there is no fee at all for you to be able to print your own forms. If you are required to e-file, state or federal, there is a fee with Atrix, and we'll see a little bit later in this. I'll give you their link so that you can go out and check their rates. You do also have an option, even if you're not required to e-file, that you can have Atrix do everything. So what that means is you get your information from Sage into Atrix, and then you just upload that information to them. They are going to print your W-2s. They are going to issue those W-2s to your employees or prior employees. They will do all of the e-filing, and they will basically take care of everything for you. And then there is a fee to do that. In their fee structure, they have some bundle packages where it doesn't matter how many employees you have, or you can pay like on a per employee basis. I did the webinar this morning on 1099s. The same thing is applicable for that. You can choose to have them do everything. Over the past few years, we are starting to have more and more clients let Atrix do everything because they're finding that it is much more efficient and it's actually more cost effective. So if you take into consideration, the cost to purchase your forms, your envelopes, your postage if you're mailing them out, the time it takes you to print them, stuff them, that whole process, that it is actually more efficient and cost less to have them do it. And to date, I have not had any complaints from clients about the process with Atrix. From all of the feedback I've ever received, it's very efficient, it's very easy, and they have not had any issues. If anyone on the line has had an issue, please feel free to speak up or send me an email separately. But I'm not aware of any issues whatsoever. And it makes life a whole lot easier for payroll folks just to kind of hand that off. So that is an option. So now we're going to talk about creating historical companies. And for those of you that are on the call today that are maybe new to Sage 100 and have just implemented within the past year or two, I'm going to be giving information because how you do it in version 2017 and below is different than the recommendation if you're running 2018 or higher. So I'm going to kind of give you both scenarios. If you are on version 2017 or below, as you know, with payroll, you have a quarter-end processing, and you have to close a quarter before you can process for the next quarter. So the same is applicable at the end of the year. So you literally have to close out 2019 before you can process your first payroll of 2020. So, but when you do that closing, it basically kind of wipes out your year-to-date information so that, your quarterlies would have to be done before you close the quarter. Your W-2s would have to be done before you close the quarter. So there's a lot of things that have to be done. Well, normally, because of the timing of year-end and holidays and everything we have going on, there's not time for users to finish their last payroll in 2019 and get all of that done before their first payroll of the new year. So that is why we have always recommended is that we create a historical company of your live payroll after your last payroll of the year. So So the company would be created after your last payroll of 2019 and before you close the year. If, excuse me, if you are on version 2018 or 2019, which is considered Payroll 2.0, that is not mandatory any longer because Sage now stores the history and the data differently, and it doesn't wipe it out when you do a year-end or period-end close. We have some clients that are like, you know what, we've always created that historical company, and we would just rather do that, rather to be safe than sorry, and just make sure we have a copy for whatever reason. You certainly can still do that. There's no reason why the process can't be exactly the same. But I do want you to understand, if you're on version 2018 or 2019, it is not mandatory that you create that historical company. Otherwise, it is something you need to do unless you're going to get your W-2s done like the last week in December. So does anybody have any, if you have any questions about that, please type those in, and I can go into more detail. So so we've talked about version 2018 and version 2019 as well. We just talked about that. And last year we recommended, if it was your first year on 2018, that you go ahead and make that historical company, because that version was new to all of us, and we just wanted to make sure there weren't any issues. But we have not had any problems with those prior versions, so it is strictly up to you. So before I move into Sage and do a demo of creating that historical company, I'm going to open it up and see if there are any questions. So I'll give everyone just a second. So while you may be typing those in, I'm going to go ahead and move over to my Sage. So the process that I'm going to go through today is in the 2018 version of Sage 100, which is Payroll 2.0. The process that I'm going through is the same even if you're on 2017 or lower. And if your screen looks a little bit different with the tree views and so forth, you may be using the updated view from Sage 100 Cloud. But again, the folders and the features that I'm going to click on are going to be exactly the same. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go into the Library Master module. You're going to go into Company Maintenance, and you're going to create the historic company code first. So what we usually do, if you just have one payroll company, we usually recommend making the code like we would make it Y19 for year 2019. If you have multiple companies, so maybe you have Oasis Solutions and you have Sage Solutions, we might recommend that you call the historical Oasis company O19 and the historical Sage Solutions company S19, something where you can keep them, keep track of what is what. So, excuse me, you're going to go ahead and you're going to create the company code. You're going to type in the company, and then you should go in and fill out the address, your phone numbers, your federal ID, and your state ID, because when you go to print your W-2s, it is going to take a look at this, and it's going to pull from the company maintenance. So if you leave this blank, especially in 2017 or lower, then that information is not going to print on your W-2 forms. So go ahead and fill all of this in. And at this point, you're going to go ahead and you're going to activate it. So I'm going to click Activate. And it says it must be saved before you activate. Do you want to save it? I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And then it's going to bring up and it's going to list the modules that you want to activate in this historical company. Now you can make a copy of everything if you want to. The scenario that I'm going to do today is that I'm only interested in making a copy of my payroll. So Sage 100 mandates that you always include common information. It always has to include general ledger, and then you can pick whatever modules you want. So I'm going to go ahead and do payroll. So again, I have to do common information, I have to do general ledger, and I'm going to select the payroll module, and I'm going to click proceed. So what it's going to do is it's going to activate those those modules within my Y19. So those modules are kind of sitting out there just as empty shells. Nothing in them, just not even really, not even set up. So I have my modules. Then I'm going to, from this screen, I'm going to click my copy button. And you're going to get a warning, make sure that you know what you're doing. And this is the screen where you want to kind of pause and pay attention to what you're doing. So the source company is asking you what company you want to copy from. So I want to copy from the ABC company. The destination is where I'm copying to. You do not want to get these backwards, or you're going to copy blank data over your live company. So source company is where you're copying from. Destination is where you're copying to. Now you'll notice that it pulled up all of the modules. So I'm just going to remove that. And notice how general ledger, that little box is gray, and so is common data. That's because, again, those are required. I'm just going to I'm going to unselect everything. I'm going to go back and I'm going to select common data. Well, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. General ledger. Okay. When I click general ledger, it automatically populated common data. And then I'm going to select payroll. So before I click proceed, and if you're working with one of the consultants here at Sage, we're going to stop at this point. We're going to double check, make sure we have the right source company, the right destination, and we're copying the proper modules. I'm going to click proceed. And it says, do you want to copy all the data files? I'm going to say yes. And then it's going to go through and copy those. Now I have very little data, so it's already finished. So I'm going to close out of here. And then what your next step should be is you should go into that company, the new company that you created. Do not ever miss this step if you're doing it yourself. Go into this new company, go into payroll, go into main, go into employee maintenance, and that's fine. I do not want to upload the new tax table. Go into employee maintenance. And it's telling me I have payroll data entry in process. You probably will not at the time you're doing this. See if we're going to get the screen to come up. There we go. So what you will do is once you get into employee maintenance, I want you to review several employees. So you're going to pull that employee up, and you're going to go over to their pay history. I believe in 2017 or below, it's called check history. And you're actually going to then take a look at the year, and you're going to want to make sure that it lists all of their checks or all of their payment history, and that their year-to-date totals appear to be correct. Now again, I have in my demo data, there's not a lot of history. So if I had a good scenario, you would see his information here. So it doesn't actually look like, I apologize, that there's any employees with information. Now I will tell you, if you do this and you see that there's no information, then something happened with your copying. So I'm sorry, I apologize. I thought there was more data in this company. So I apologize that I did not have payroll data in there. So if that's confusing and you want to put in any questions, please feel free to do so. But what you're going to want to do is, you know, what I do is I ask, if I'm doing this for you, I'm going to go in and I'm probably going to grab the first employee, then I'm going to go down and scroll down to the middle and then pick a few at the end. And all I'm basically doing is just to make sure that the history is there. You know, the other thing that I might do is I might go into the reports, and I might do a quarterly pay recap. I may take a look at the quarterly report just to make sure that no errors pop up and that it looks like all of the information transferred over properly. There's no need to check the general ledger because we're not doing anything with the GL, but you are checking payroll before you do that period end. So once I've taken a look at Y19 and it is okay, then I'm ready to go close out my ABC company. If you go into Y19 and the data is not there, you're going to go back and do that same, you're not going to create Y19 again, but you're going to go back into company maintenance. You're going to go back into Y19 and you're going to click copy and you're going to go through that step again. So, and try it again. Or if you feel more comfortable with picking up the phone and calling us, then one of our year-end consultants can certainly help you and walk through that. I cannot emphasize enough, do not miss that step of double checking and making sure your data copied over. Every year we usually have at least one call where they either copied it or thought they copied it, didn't check it, closed out. They were on an older version, 2017 or below, and their W-2 information was gone. So please do not skip that step. Even if you're on 2018 or 2019 and you make the decision to create that historical company, please go in and check it and make sure the data's there. You know, if you've taken the time to copy the data and want to keep it, let's make sure that it's correct. So again, I'm going to open it up if anybody has any questions or comments about that process. So that is kind of step number one. And then once you have the information copied properly, then you can go back into your live company, go into payroll, and then go into period end and do your year end, quarter end, print all your reports and so forth. That will allow you to go ahead and then start processing payroll in 2020. And then when you print your W-2s, if you're running version 17 or below, we will print those W-2s out of your historical company. If you're on 2018 or 2019, we will print those out of your live company, but you'll have the historical there in case you need it. So I'm going to give you just a minute to see if anybody has any additional questions before we move further. Okay, I'm not getting any additional questions. All right, so that takes us through creating the historical company and copying that data over. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint presentation. And part of this is going to be reiterated from what we just talked about. couple of FAQs. Do I have to copy all of my module data? No, you're only required to do common information, GL, and then whatever modules you want, which we did payroll. If you want to do everything, that's perfectly okay. Nobody should be working in the company, when you're copying that payroll data. And I do have a question, so give me just a second. So this question is, if we are on 2017, do we have copied all modules we use? I'm not sure I understand that question exactly. If you're asking if you're on 2017, if you have to copy all of your modules, the answer is no. Copying all of the modules is optional for anyone. Copying GL, common information, and payroll is required. So if that does not answer your question, please clarify the question a little bit, please, and then I'll be glad to address that further. This just talks about what happens if you don't create that historical company and you close the quarter. If you're on 2017 or lower, basically that year-to-date information is gone, and you're going to have to take old reports and piece information back together. And you just really don't want to do that, and none of us have time to do that at year end. So you know how busy you are with everything else that occurs at year end. So it's, always double check everything. Yeah, this is talking about it's when you. So let's say I'm looking at this last bullet point, and it says that when you're using Atrix, it is possible to reprint your W-2s without having that historical company. So let's say your last payroll is December 23rd, and you know that you're going to have all your W-2s out by the end of the year, so you don't even create that historical company. If an employee does then lose their W-2 or whatever, and you need to reprint it, you can do it with Atrix. But our position has always been, if you're on 2017 or below, you need to create that historical company. Okay. So a question that we get a lot is, do I have to e-file to use Atrix? And we kind of went through what the requirements are for state and federal e-filing earlier in the presentation. If all you need to do, let's say you have 10 employees, and all you want to do is just print your W-2s and you don't have to e-file, there is no charge at all. It is free as a part of your subscription plan. The only time there is a fee that comes into play directly with Atrix is if you are required, if you want to e-file or you want to have them do the whole process for you. In order to access Atrix, you do have to register with Atrix, which is literally just filling out a little form with them, and this is their website, so you might want to make a note of that. I get a lot of questions on, well, in order to decide whether it's worth me doing all the work myself or having Atrix do it all, what are their fees? And this is the website you can refer to. If you have any trouble getting any information, just let me know. But it will give you they have options where you can pay per employee, or they also have bundles so that, if you have 1,000 employees, it's going to be much cheaper to purchase the bundle for them. And they offer, I think you can get those bundles to also include 1099s if that is something that you use. So make a note of that website. So here are the forms that are used. And if you've been doing payroll and W-2s and Sage for the past probably 4, 5, 6 years, you're familiar with this. But if it's your first year, this is something that you need to take note. You do not use pre-printed W-2 forms with Atrix. You use the blank forms. So what is supported with Atrix is they require, this is for W-2s, the blank, perforated 4 up. Okay? And this just talks about you find it more cost effective to have Atrix do the whole thing. But again, this is the form that you need. Blank, perforated 4 up. The others are not supported and will not print properly. The alignment will not be proper if you do not use that form. This is a whole lot of information, but basically you probably will get emails from Sage saying that you can order the forms from them and that those forms are supported with Sage. The federal forms are federal forms regardless of whether or not you purchase them through Sage. You purchase them through your local printer, or you purchase them at Office Depot, Office Max, anywhere like that. The form is the same form. Excuse me. It does talk about that Sage 100 includes the print and sign tax forms that can be used for e-filing and reporting. What I would suggest that you do is compare prices. If you want to see how much Sage charges, which I've heard that sometimes their prices are cheaper than what they can get them for at Office Depot. But if you're wanting these forms, you need to go ahead and get them ordered soon. So I'll have a link in a minute of where you can go. But the Sage forms, these are the 2 different form codes. And if you need for me to follow up with you on sending you copies of these pages with this information, I'll be glad to do so, and you can email me after the presentation today. Also, if you want to review this information, probably within the next 2 days, you're going to receive an email acknowledging that you attended this webinar, and it is going to provide you a link to the recording because this presentation is also going to be recorded. So again, this just kind of talks about the forms that you need, but again, it needs to be the blank, perforated 4 up. If you are required to do ACA reporting, we obviously can help you pull that information together through Atrix, but there is some pre-work that you have to do. We have on our website, these webinars are actually from 2015, but all of the information is still applicable. And we actually have 5 short webinars that talk about ACA. So it would be good to view those. Also, if you are current with your Sage subscription, which you would have to be to do W-2s, Sage University also has free anytime learning for very similar sessions regarding how to do ACA reporting. But again, this is on our website, and if you have any trouble finding that, just let me know. I'm finding more and more clients, actually their insurance providers or their benefit provider is doing this reporting for them as a part of their package, so they're not having to deal with that, but that is something that we certainly can help with. And then just to let you know that our offices are going to be closed a half a day on Christmas Eve. We're going to be closed all day on Christmas Day, and we're going to be closed all day on New Year's Day. So if you have additional questions or you want to schedule year-end assistance, you need to get with our tech support department. But with that, I want to let everyone know that you should have received, or someone within your organization should have received an email from me via Oasis. I believe they went out on November 20th. And it gave information on how to contact us and request year-end assistance. and there are questions. So what you need to do is basically copy and paste that email into a reply, answer all the questions with, have your answer and the question together, all that are applicable, and return that to our tech support team. And then that gets set up in the system, and I get a notification, and I will then personally call you and to schedule all the appointments. So we schedule everything from helping you create the historical company and set it up, to helping you with Atrix and getting your W-2s printed, helping you with your e-filing, helping you with your ACA, helping with the tax table updates, anything related to that, we will help you do. But it is on a first come, first served basis. So go back and look for that email. If you have not submitted it, please do. If you have submitted it already and have not gotten a call, I was out of the office last week, so I'm going to be reaching out to people later this week and early next week. So if you've submitted the information, you don't have to resubmit it. I would say if you have not heard from me by like the middle of December, by the 15th, then reach out to me personally, because you should have been contacted by then if you have submitted your request. So I'm going to open it up again and see if anyone has any additional questions, to go ahead and to put that information in. And if not, we'll go ahead and conclude today's webinar. I will tell you that we are having the same presentation next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time related to payroll. If you process 1099s and you missed the presentation this morning, we will have another presentation next Tuesday at 2 p.m. that deals with 1099 history and how to manage 1099s within your SAFE system. So I'm not seeing any additional questions. So again, if there's anything that you think of after the fact, if you want to email me at pam@oasisky.com, I will be more than glad to respond to you. So I want to thank everyone for attending today. I'm going to go ahead and end the session. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.